Hello and welcome to Meet Our Makers, an artist interview podcast produced in association with Beats Per Minute. I'm your host, Jeremy J. Facette. On this episode, we get to meet Youth Lagoon, otherwise known as Trevor Powers. Trevor released 3 albums as Youth Lagoon in the early 2010s to pretty generous acclaim, and then he abandoned the moniker around 2015. He released a couple albums under his own name, but now he is back with his 4th Youth Lagoon record, Heaven is a Junkyard. In this chat, Trevor and I discuss quite a lot about the story behind this new record, what compelled him to drop the Youth Lagoon moniker in the first place and then now to bring it back, as well as the pretty grave health scare that almost completely derailed everything. We get into some of the troubling but also the really beautiful things and the misconceptions of his beloved home state of Idaho. We talk about religion and spirituality, how those things influence his life and his work, and a little bit about how, especially in light of recent and current events, religion and legislation have sort of been usurped by bigotry and hubris. It's a pretty far-ranging talk, but Trevor spoke to me with such candor and warmth and humor and insight, and I think you'll really appreciate it. I think you'll enjoy this talk. And just before we get into it, I would like to mention again that Meet Our Makers is now on Patreon. You can head to patreon.com/meetourmakers. If you feel generous, I urge you to consider donating, becoming a patron today for some little perks, and also just to support this show that I love doing and that I hope you love listening to. So thank you for listening. Please enjoy. This is me meeting Youth Lagoon.
I'm doing good. I'm very good.
Good.
Where are you based?
I'm in Connecticut.
Okay, gotcha.
Are you you beaming in from Idaho?
Yep. I'm in Idaho right now. It's so fucking cold. It's been it's been so freezing, and it's funny too because it's like the weather can't make up its mind because it's been so up and down where it feels it's almost blizzard-esque. And then it might be like that for 2 days. And then for 3 days, it'll be like in the 50s and then drops back down. So that's the main thing is I can deal with the cold if it's full on and you know what to expect. But when it's so up and down, that's what makes it toys with you a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it's been here too. Connecticut's sort of known for being a little all over the place with its weather. Yeah, we've had a warm winter, but it's been chilly these past few days. Probably not like Idaho, but it's been chilly these past few days.
Is it kind of nice though for you to have all the different seasons?
Yeah, I mean, I do like the seasons.
Well, because so many people, like a lot of my closest friends, that live many different places. A lot of people don't get to experience seasons, and they don't really even know what it's like, unless they go back to visit their families wherever their families are from for the holidays or something. The concept of seasons is kind of lost.
Are you guys missing any seasons?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely experienced the full extent of every season.
Yeah. No, we pretty much do too. I mean, it's only snowed here like twice this winter, which is really really unusual.
Really snow much.
No,
okay,
I mean it is unusual.
More.
Yeah, it usually snows more. I mean, maybe we don't get blizzards that often, I guess, but yeah, it usually snows more. And I don't mind the snow, so I'm kind of missing it a little bit.
Yeah, I don't mind the snow either up until about I kind of check out of the snow after like mid-January. Then I'm over it.
Yeah, you're like, bring on the flowers, please.
Yeah, please.
Well, I'm hopefully you're warm wherever you are right now.
I'm warm. I'm cozy.
Okay, good. As am I. So thank you, Trevor, for joining me today to chat about your new record.
Absolutely. Thank you for chatting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little early. I realize I was trying to set up the chat, and then I was like, yeah, we can do next week. And then I'm like, when does the album? Oh, it doesn't come out till June.
Yeah. Well, no,
which is weird.
It's good for me, and also it's also a funny thing too because I'm in that headspace where like when I'm making music exists in this bubble of it's all the stuff that I don't know how to talk about. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all this mental processing or spiritual processing, these things that happen within this zone that it feels like it can only exist within the music. So then the hardest part is when you capture that and you have this thing it feels like a living, breathing thing, to then try to talk about what that thing is in ways that are just words. That's what makes it tricky. And especially this part of the process, because I haven't had any practice. So bear with me
Right.
as I'm trying in real time to figure out how to talk about the things that are untalkable.
This is a good trial run. I mean, I'm not Rolling Stone, so
Well,
I appreciate it though. I mean, I appreciate you trying. We're gonna try. We're gonna try today to
okay.
talk about the
Okay.
untalkable.
Cool. Deal.
So yeah, you mentioned you haven't had practice. I mean, you haven't had a record of any sort come out for almost 3 years. I was trying to check my dates before this chat a few minutes ago. Your last record is Capricorn, which came out back in 2020.
Yeah.
That this new one, Heaven is a Junkyard, is coming out June 9th on Fat Possum. And yeah, it's been a minute. So, I mean, how are you feeling now that you're kind of coming back to it?
I feel really good, and I feel I I've just I it's hard to put my finger on all the different ways that I have morphed into a new person over the last since I killed off Youth Lagoon in 2000. I think I announced it in 2015. Maybe the last show was like early 2016, but for the most part, it was pretty dead to me starting in 2015. And since that all went down, I had just hit this point where I felt so stuck, or I felt like there were all these expectations of, it was kind of like it was like a dance monkey dance scenario where
Right.
there's this thing, there's like people expect, you can only be this one thing. And so it felt like I was constantly driving with, there was like certain lanes on the road that I had to stay in, and it felt so suffocating. And I would still swerve all over the road, but it was kind of like, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. And
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of that was, I think a lot of that was actually something that I had put on myself. And there was pressure from the industry, there was pressure from it's hard to tell, like how much of it is make believe or exists in my head, and how much of it
Mm-hmm.
was real. But I definitely felt a lot of suffocation. And so I hit this point where I was like, I just can't continue to grow through this name because of all these roadblocks I had set up for myself. And so I killed it off, and I started exploring all these different. Oh, my brother-in-law just pulled up. I might have to tell him that I can't answer the door. Sorry. I'll just scoot to the back room. He won't see me. But anyways, sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I started experiencing all these different changes within myself, where it was it felt almost like going to college, where I was able to explore all this new territory
Hmm.
relatively risk free, where it was under my own name, but it was kind of like no one really knew that it existed. It took a lot of the pressure off of, even though it's just the difference between two words, because Youth Lagoon is just my thing, it's my baby. It's just another vehicle to say things. It was like
Mm-hmm.
losing those two words and going under my own name. Maybe it was also the nature of just having to be my name. I just felt like I had freedom to explore. I had the sandbox totally open to do whatever the fuck I want to do. And it was that was the beginning of when I really started to unlock these new parts of my brain. And as that kept going, I had Mulberry Violence that I had
Mm-hmm.
recorded in 2000. I think that came out in 2018. And that was a huge growing experience, because that was that that whole album felt very it felt very much so in this zone of, the whole thing was uncomfortable. The whole thing was like, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. It felt like I was just feeling around in the dark, which is a lot of
Yeah.
my process anyways, but it was totally pitch black because it was like completely unknown territory.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a huge growing experience for me. And then Capricorn, which came out 2020, that was something I had done that wasn't even, I had never even expected that to see the light of day, because that was
Yeah.
more of a personal, it started off as just a personal project. And I had sent some songs to Fat Possum, and they were like, we need to release this. And that's when I had, since I had made that album under the idea of no one's going to hear it, it was made a certain way that I'm really thankful for, because that was all the more so like, okay, like no eyes are going to be on this, like no ears are going to be on this. It's just for me.
Yeah.
And within that, I think that there's a lot of, I'm super proud of what that album is. Because yeah, like when it came out, it made me feel really naked, because like I said, when I was writing those songs, they weren't intended for other people. And so I felt really vulnerable, but that was a growing experience too, because it allowed me to learn all kinds of different ways, new ways to produce, and new ways to like sample my own music and twist it on its head and rework things. And so fast forward to 2021. I ended up going through all kinds of, I don't even know the weightiest way to say it, or if I should avoid saying it a weighty way, but it not to sound overly dramatic, but it was the hardest thing I've ever been through in my entire life, times a million. And I wasn't sure if I was even going to live. And it was a really bad drug reaction. So I had this over the counter reaction to this medication, and it turned my entire world upside down. And in that process, it was, the only place to turn was inside. It was like no one understood what I was going through around me. And so it forced me to really get to know the deep, dark corners of who I am as a person, and what my soul looks like. And yeah, and in all that, I hit this point where I had started using music as this way to get through this experience. And the first song that I had written for this record, which at the time, I wasn't even thinking of I wasn't thinking of anything as a record. It was more so just songs. And the first thing that really clicked into place was Idaho Alien. And when I had written that, I had sent it to my manager, and we had started talking, and I was like, this feels like a Youth Lagoon record. It doesn't feel like a Youth Lagoon record in the sense of when I had killed off Youth Lagoon, where that would have been then.
Yeah.
This to me feels like a new project, but it feels like if Youth Lagoon was to like enter this other dimension, this upside down, dark Americana R&B sort of dimension, like this is what it would be. And that was the beginning of all of this.
So the decision then to kind of return to this Youth Lagoon moniker came after you had already written Idaho Alien.
Yeah. Yep. So that was already written. And so my whole thing too was, I hit this point with myself where I've seen many therapists through the years, and people who have, tried to help deal with, give me tools for anxiety and tools for depression and all these mental battles. And I had talked to this one therapist. He was actually a hypnotherapist back a couple years ago, and he had asked me to name some things that I love about myself, some qualities that I love about myself. And I couldn't think of anything, and I just started tearing up. And that was a huge wake up call for me, because I I didn't know a way to actually love myself and accept myself. And with Idaho Alien, when I had cracked that veil open, and I was like, this feels like some new dimension of Youth Lagoon. It feels like a new project, but it feels like, like this whole new gate has been opened up. There was my main reason for actually walking through that gate was it felt like the truest form of self-love. It felt
Mm-hmm.
like I can take this thing that I had put limitations on, and I can usher it into this whole new realm of who I am now and where I'm heading. And that it really did feel like the truest sense of self-love.
Well, to use the analogy you mentioned earlier, it's kind of like Youth Lagoon went to college,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
came out
It,
the other
it
side.
yeah, it was kind of like, yeah, just learning. It was just this constant state of learning and learning and
Mm-hmm.
learning and growing and failing and writing loads of shitty songs that will never see the light of day. And that's my whole process.
Sure.
I don't like my main secret, and this has always been the case. My main secret is just I sit down and I work enough to get, because I'm so full of terrible ideas, and I just work enough to get all the bad ideas out
Mm-hmm.
so that I can have the one good idea every, like, it could be every 2 months, it could be every 4 months, it could be every like 1 week, but you
Yeah.
just don't know until you sit down and you work and work and work and work. And really, over the last, like, even when I was working on Capricorn, there were still some of these ideas that were starting to swim around in my head that I was always working towards this bigger thing, and I wasn't sure what the bigger thing was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it all starts, like, if I have these ideas and I just write them down and I keep pursuing it, and yeah, just failing over and over and over again, and until you have the one thing that hits, and then another thing that hits, and then you're like, okay, fuck, this is actually turning into something.
Mm-hmm. So then now that you're coming back with this Youth Lagoon name back intact, even though it is a little bit different, do you feel any kind of like renewed pressure, or do you actually not at all?
I actually don't at all, which is nuts, because if you would have asked me, or if you would have told me back in 2015, when I felt so suffocated by this thing, that essentially it was me putting a bag or a noose over my own head and neck,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just this aura of, like I said, it was like a fictional noose. And if you would have told me back then that I would be doing what I'm doing now in terms of reopening that gate, but then besides that, like fully, um I don't know, if I could get a snapshot of who I am as a person now versus who I was then, I just straight up wouldn't have been able to believe you, because even my anxiety, like what used to be my that used to be like the biggest demon on my shoulder. It was
Mm-hmm.
always just crawling around my back. Even that, since that whole drug reaction went down, and I had to face everything that scared me the most dead in the eyes. It was like there was freedom for the first time in my life, where it's kind of like if you jump into an ice bath, and that feeling of when you get out of the ice bath
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like death, you feel like you're actually dying in that thing, but then when you get out, you're a new person, and you feel like you've been reborn.
Mm.
And that's how this whole situation feels. So through meditation and through all this self-work and self-love, it's been this state of really just conquering myself.
And how long were you sort of down and out from this reaction?
Well, I'm still healing.
Okay.
It was really, really, really bad for the first, I would say, like the first, like, 9 months or so, 10
Mm.
months. It was really bad. Um, yeah, like 6 to 8 months, it was like fucking hell. But then, like, 9, 10 months, it was starting to, like, I could see, okay, like, I'm gonna get out of this. This is gonna be something that I can, like, one day look back on and
Yeah.
have that holy shit moment. But yeah, my body's still healing from it, but it's worlds apart from where it was. And also, that the more that I go to bed at night and I think tomorrow's a new day and I'm going to wake up a little bit better. And I do that every single night. I meditate and I think I'm going to be just a little bit better. And that's been the case every time.
And well, I'm glad you're doing better.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Was there any part of you that like wanted to wait for this album because of that?
Yeah, for sure. Cause I at the time I was, when I was doing a lot of these demos, I had to take so many breaks through the whole process, because I would be able to sing these little snippets. I might be able to sing like half of a verse or like maybe 3 lines, and I had to take a break because my voice was so toasted from this. Cause part of the whole reaction was I had this, it was like a geyser of acid coming up from my stomach. And so doctors weren't sure what was going on. I had an endoscopy and then I had a colonoscopy to see like, of the other end. And like no doctor had any idea what was happening. And so I had met with multiple specialists. I had an ER visit. You name it. And so in all that, like my vocal cords for many, many months, they got so bad that the only way I could communicate to people would be, if my older brother came to town from Seattle, for instance, we would go to the bookstore and we would just text. So we'd be looking at books and I would just be texting him, or I would be writing things down in my notes and holding up whatever I was typing out. Or I would have a notepad, over the holidays too. I would have this notepad I remember Christmas of 2021, I had this notepad that I would take over to my parents' house. And same with even when I had started doing photos with my buddy Tyler Williams, he's the one that directed the Idaho Alien video.
Right.
And even him and I were joking around the other day, because when we had first started driving around Idaho and taking photos and started our whole collaboration process, I could barely talk, and so I had this bottle of alkaline water that I would chug, and then I would write down things, or I would just whisper to him like, "I'm sorry, I can't talk this whole drive." And so when I was working on the demos, there was a lot of that process where I would be able to sing a little bit, like I might be able to do 1 line, and I would do 1 line that night. And then the next morning I might be able to do another line. And so it was just chipping away. So the whole time going into getting ready for actually recording it, I was like, how the hell is this going to work?
Yeah. But it did.
It did
Eventually.
work. Yeah.
So you mentioned, Idaho Alien as being sort of like this moment of unlocking this record a little bit and kind of giving you the keys to the rest of the album. But at this point, for what it's worth, today's March 9th. I have no idea what day this will come out because your album doesn't come out for 3 months. But the only single out right now is Idaho Alien, and I think people have been responding pretty well to it. What would you say the song is sort of trying to communicate for you?
Well, that's a tough question, because there's a lot going on in the song. There's a lot of different layers, and some of it is pulling from a story. It's definitely a storytelling kind of song, and I would say the whole album feels like that, where there's stories going on with that are based on friends or family or neighbors or whatever I'm immediately surrounded on, and then I kind of expand these stories and turn them into this other world that I'm in. So some of the lines could be they could be the most personal thing I've ever sung, and then the next line might be something that a character's singing, and so it's all this intermingling of fact and fiction. And Idaho Alien, that's no different, because that, like, the chorus of that song is incredibly personal, because as I was at the peak of everything going on health wise, I was taking a bath and I was having, and I guess I'm a little nervous to say too much because I don't want to change people's perception of the song. But I was having a lot of I was having battles with not wanting to escape my body because my body felt like a prison, and it felt like this thing that I just could not escape. And so I had all these feelings of like just kind of wanting it to be over and wanting to end it. And I never did, like did anything that was even, didn't go much further than a thought, but I had that thought, and it really worked. It bothered me a lot, and it wrecked me for a while. Cause I'm like, I just don't, how do I get to the point of loving my body and not seeing my body as a prison? And I knew that true healing wouldn't come until I was actually able to fully do that, and fully, even though I was in pain, to fully say to my body, I love you as you are. But to exercise some of those demons, that's where that chorus came from, is talking about wanting to escape everything and wanting to just fade into this whole other frontier when I was in the bathtub.
So there's a mix of sort of hyper personal with very fictionalized as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But all very kind of steeped in your sort of observations of, I guess, the people in the world around you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. It really goes, it varies line by line. Like there might be some lines that are based on something that I saw in my neighborhood, and then there could be another line that's like a funny thing that my niece said, or it's this patchwork quilt of all these things. But yeah, some of the lines are like you said, hyper personal, to the point where I was even going into this, since this is really the first time of me trying to figure out how to talk about this. I'm like, what do I want? Like with Idaho Alien, what do I want to say about the chorus? But yeah, the honest to God truth is like, that's just how I felt.
Yeah. And you mentioned this sort of storyteller quality. I noticed that too as I was listening to the record. It's certainly not, specific to Idaho Alien. That is kind of an album thing that's going on here. And I was struck earlier, you said something about how it was like this kind of version of Americana to you, like this sort of like, and to me, I kind of feel it's like this like haunted, like Hopper painting.
Yeah,
like,
totally. 100%.
Like it's like Nighthawks at the diner, but like in the middle of the desert, and David Lynch is directing it, and
yes, all that.
So,
yeah.
and there is that kind of like skewed version of Americana, but it's also not. It's not like it's total fiction. I mean, there's very recognizable characters here. I mean, were you trying to kind of give a sort of accurate portrayal, even if it's fictional characters? What did you feel a responsibility to give a realistic portrayal of kind of what you're noticing?
Oh yeah, 100%. And that was also even playing with the idea of fictional characters. A lot of what those characters are doing is coming from a personal place, or a lot of what the characters are saying is coming from a personal place. So it's this constant, it's this relationship between trying to figure out, this might be a dark part of my soul, or this might be a part of my soul that is full of light and love. And that balance between working with other characters, like almost like playing a game of chess, where this whole thing is, it's all, there's a strategy to the storytelling, and even going song to song. Like this is the first record I've ever done that has been, the whole track list has been mapped out from the beginning. So once I started getting some of the pieces on the board, I knew, okay, I want this to go into this, and then I want this story to go into this. And then I had this whole overarching thing and feeling that I wanted to express. And yeah, it all comes from truth. I'll say that. Like
Right.
I wasn't setting out to make good songs. I wasn't setting out to make a good record. I was setting out to make a truthful record and truthful songs. And I thought the goodness, if I could do that, the goodness is naturally going to inhabit that space.
Yeah. And you mentioned before too that, you know, a lot of this record was born out of that sort of rush or joy that you felt from finishing Idaho Alien and feeling like that kind of world had been opened. And yet I kind of feel like this is your darkest record, at least your darkest Youth Lagoon record.
Yeah, in
you know?
in a lot of ways, it is, and it's interesting though because it doesn't play like if you were to listen to it at surface,
right,
at some kind of surface value, like someone had it on in the background and
right.
they're not paying attention to what is actually being said, then people wouldn't know that. But if you're sitting down and you're in it and you're invested in the words, then absolutely.
Yeah, I mean these are characters, whether it's you or otherwise, these are characters who are kind of going through it and like, you know, having some emotional turmoil. And there's, you know, there's a lot of references to kind of like sorrow, and there's a lot of references to drugs, and there's a lot of references to kind of regrets almost. So yeah, if you pay attention, there's a lot of darkness here.
Yeah, for sure.
And
that's just how it worked. That's just how it started coming out because I liked the idea of, so when I had stumbled onto Idaho Alien and that whole thing had a shape to it and I could recognize that shape, that's when I had that moment of seeing so many different ways to take that and flip it on its head. And each song does have it is very individual, but there's a cohesiveness, there's a glue that runs throughout the entire record that makes all the tracks feel truly inseparable. And it is in the truest sense of the word album. It is definitely an album, you know, like you can listen to it song to song, but the whole thing plays as a record.
Do you think that will influence your performances of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm just now at that point of trying to figure out how to do that. I'm still gonna mix it up. I don't really want to. Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, you don't have to play the record front to back.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's going to be the case. There's going to be a mix of all kinds of different stuff, but I do think that I'll end up like, you know, a couple songs here, a couple songs there.
Right. One of the singles that will probably be out by the time this comes up is The Sling, which I've read in my notes that were given to me that you have sort of called this song like the core of the record. And I'm wondering why, like what makes The Sling sort of the core for you?
Well, it's tough because that was a song written right after Idaho Alien. So with Idaho Alien, that was the moment that showed me the path. Like this is the path that it put all the lights on that were previously, you know, that whole field was very, very dark before. So all the lights came on. And then when I started walking down that path and then I came across, you know, the next thing was The Sling. I think the reason that feels like the core is that, well, first off, that's where the album title comes from.
True.
So that's when all that came to be.
A striking title, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I was really, when that popped into my head, I really had no doubts that was it. And so with that being the song with the title, and also with that being the second song that I had written in that shared space, that's when I knew without a doubt that I have an album. It was like I had an album, but then I just had to I had to discover the rest of the fossils, but I knew the fossils were in the field.
That's a good metaphor for it. See, you can talk about the untalkable.
I'm trying.
One more song I want to touch on specifically because it's been one of my favorites is Mercury, which in some ways is maybe like for lack of better words, like the biggest song on the record. It has sort of this like chorus that just kind of like blooms.
Yeah.
and the line, does heaven, I think it's, does heaven glow like Mercury? Is that the line?
Yeah, that's the line.
So what's the story or the process behind this song? Because it does, for me, it stands out in good ways. For me, it stands out from the album.
Well, this is, so I say Idaho Alien was the first song that was written, and that is the truth in the sense of giving the identity to what the album is. But Mercury had early versions years ago. So I had actually gone out to, I had some sessions with a buddy of mine out in Atlanta. Like, it was shortly after Mulberry Violence had come out. So it was probably, that came out in 2018. So these sessions were probably 2019. And I had it in a really rough form where I had a couple, I had the gist of I had the core of what the song could be, but we were trying to capture it in this way that was, it was mixed with these other songs that will never see the light of day. And I think Mercury ended up kind of getting buried by those songs because those songs just weren't very strong. And so when I came back home after those sessions, I thought I had something with Mercury, but I also had a bad taste, not a bad taste in my mouth, but I wasn't in love with the rest of the songs. And so I was still very much so searching. And fast forward to after I had started the whole process of, this feels, as song to song, this feels like it's turning into a record. That's when I had revisited the early version of Mercury, and it hit me, there's something here, and then started reworking that. But yeah, that seed was planted years ago. And it's funny because I have so many demos on my computer and on my voice memos and on old cassette tapes. And the reason I don't ever delete them is because of that exact situation. You don't know when you're going to listen to something that you had done years ago, and then you'll be able to hear it a new way and know what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too that you sort of put aside Youth Lagoon and you created the sketch anyway of Mercury while Youth Lagoon was put aside.
Dead,
and now, now that you came back to it, you're like, wait, that actually makes sense now. Maybe it didn't make sense then.
Yeah. Yep, that's it. Because it didn't line up with, like I said, when I had done that song in that same session, there were all these other songs that they just didn't have the right form or emotion, or they just didn't feel true. And that one did, but at the time I couldn't really see it, and it didn't really make sense to me.
And Mercury is only one of the, I mentioned there's references to sort of sadness or even a lot of sort of drug usage, but there is also a lot of references in this record to God and heaven and religion. Is that a big part of your life? And how does that end up influencing your work? Those ideas, those themes?
Well, God definitely is a big part of my life, not religion. I grew up religious, and it was really, it's very, very brainwashy. And a lot of it was that caused so much. I think that's where a lot of the lack of self-love throughout my entire life comes from, is being in those systems and being in those environments where you should think this way and you shouldn't think this way. And God is in this form, but God is not in this form. And everything had this structure to it that was so damaging, for lack of a better way to put it. But in that damage has been this thing where I've been able to, like, everything that I've gone through, that situation made the idea of God feel more alive to me than ever before, where I would, and even my sense of what that word means has become so alive, where if I go on a walk, I feel God in the wind. I see God in the trees. And the pain that I had felt in the whole process, the healing process, and what my body was going through, knowing that God felt the pain that I did, that was a huge moment for me, because I used to think that God watches people suffer
Right.
rather than God is actually suffering with you. And so that's changed everything. But yeah, not a religious God. It's a God that changes forms every day and every conversation. And I more so view God as this great mystery, this thing that we'll never be able to understand, that's in everything. Almost like this, it's a really dumb description, but it's almost like, and I'm not even a fan of this movie, so it's a weird example, but like the first Avatar, how they talk about Awa, and there's like,
okay,
there's the tree, and like everything comes from that tree, and it's all this living, breathing thing.
right.
That's how I view God, is this.
It's like the world tree.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it changes and it grows on a daily basis, but I love picking people's brains and seeing people's, your concept of God, or if God exists or if God doesn't exist, or what God looks like or what God does. All that stuff totally depends also on your where you're born, like it's very, very geographical, like if you're born into a certain region, you're much more likely to view God this way and not this way. And I love that stuff, because it's always like, it's this constant search to understand the great unknown, the unknowable. And in the unknowable, I feel like that's where everything happens.
So is that a way in which your sort of past and current relationships with religion and what God means to you, is that a way in which that influences your work, sort of that searching?
Yeah, that, but also being at war, in a lot of ways at war with these people that like say within the realm of evangelical Christianity, which I'm surrounded by in Idaho. It is so hard for me to have these conversations with people, because I have a lot of people in, like whether it's family or whether it's people down the street or whether it's people at the grocery store, you get into a lot of conversations with people that make you fucking mad, and it makes you sad at the same time, that they view other people the way that they view them, and it's such a judgmental, separatist mindset, where there's like this, I'm up here and you're down here, and thinking that they know without a shadow of doubt who God is or what God is.
Right.
That, it drives me crazy, and it's often rooted in bigotry and hatred and all this stuff. And so that also informs the record, because coming from that small town environment, and seeing, especially after Trump got elected, and the whole world just started fucking turning upside down. I mean, it was already pretty upside down, but there, it was like that completely ignited this whole thing. And then how religion, like the toxicity of those systems, furthered that hatred and that bigotry even more. And then seeing it firsthand in Idaho, where it's on such a constant, it's such a constant basis. Obviously, there's amazing people here, so I don't want to define Idaho, in any way as just being that. But I will say you do get into a lot more challenging conversations with people on a regular basis somewhere like here than you do in, places like LA or New York, where it's
or Connecticut,
so
to be honest.
Yeah.
Because where
it's just easy to find people that like, oh yeah, you and I, we agree. So
right.
You have these little bubbles, and it's
more of a guessing game, I guess, over there.
It totally is, because you just don't know where people stand. And so you might have this conversation with someone, and they could be a really nice person, or they could come across a certain way, or even I hate saying it, but they could even dress a certain way. So you come to these conclusions of thinking that they might be of a certain political headspace.
Right.
And then when you find out, or they might say something, you're like, what the fuck? I didn't see that coming. Like,
Yeah.
this is getting kind of weird.
I thought about that like years ago, like in college, I worked at a candy store, which is such a like innocent place. You know, you just sell candy.
Oh yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
I literally caught, this was, I think Trump had been elected already, but I caught myself thinking like sometimes like, I wonder how many like neo-Nazis I serve in a day,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
never
That kind of
know. And
thing.
it's like, and in Connecticut, you know, we're pretty liberal. I mean, we were pretty left leaning in most social things. We usually are. But even here, it's like, maybe even because of that here, I'm but who is that person? Like, would I like to have a conversation with this person
Yeah.
if they weren't just buying something from me? It's a strange curiosity that I feel like, I mean, maybe because I was a teenager during Obama years, but like, I feel like until Trump got elected, I didn't think about those things.
Yeah. It changed everything. It changed
Yeah.
everything dramatically. And it also changed things like Thanksgiving dinner dramatically.
Oh my
Or,
gosh.
or,
Yeah.
or yeah, things like it might have been easier for everyone to hold their 2 cents, unless something really, really big came up, and then you could
Right.
share it. But it was like with Trump, this everything shifted in such a volcanic way that you could no longer, like, I could no longer. Most of the time, someone would say something, especially if it was someone that I was, it was in my orbit. It could be like a friend of the family,
Mm-hmm.
or like, yeah, a relative, or someone that you might be like, they might say something that's right on the cusp of like, do I turn this into something, or like,
Right. Right.
how far do I take this? But then with Trump, yeah, it just completely changed, where I'm like, I can't be around this and not like
Say
call people
something.
out and say something and like have those conversations. And
Yeah,
but it's exhausting too at the same time.
for
Like, I
sure.
get kind of jealous of people who they're not around that,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, you don't there's not the same kind of exhaustion. But in that, I think that I've grown a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how could you not? And I
Mhm.
mean, I'm also a high school teacher, and I was teaching during the Trump years, and it was weird. Like, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I'm
It was weird.
sure.
Yeah.
How was it, if you don't mind me asking, how was it? How did it take how did it take form in school?
I mean, just sort of seeing, I mean, I don't mind talking about this either because I don't work at the school anymore, but
Okay.
I'm not going to name anyone, but like, yeah. So like seeing and hearing these very young, 15, 16, 17-year-old people, like, spouting, frankly, this nonsense, you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? And like knowing they got it from their parents, and it was
Yeah.
just weird. And I mean, I don't necessarily mean that to say that like, well, the kids who come spouting, leftist stuff are fine. It was more just like, all of a sudden, these very conservative and often very bigoted things were being thought and seemingly believed by these children. And I was like, I feel like if I was a teacher 10 years ago, I might not have even known this, but now everyone is so vocal that it,
Yeah.
it got it got hard to ignore. And it was almost like oppressive at points. I was like, oh my God, like the things you guys think and the things you guys say, it's like honestly, like, that was early in my teaching career, and it did sort of instill almost like a powerless feeling, because like you
Yeah.
so want to just shake them and tell them they're wrong and they're being brainwashed or whatever, what have you, but like, you first of all, you can't, and second of
Uh-huh.
all, I'm not sure it would do any good.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and a lot of that it is so tied together with religious
Hmm.
toxicity, to where, and the programming that comes from, even the way that certain passages from the Bible are read and
Hmm.
interpreted, and that turns into this whole thing of more bigotry, and
Right.
harder for people to get out of that programming. And I'm convinced that if a lot of these people, if you were to somehow be able to push a button to instantly deprogram everything that they all the things that they feel like they have to believe, like, oh, the
Hmm.
Bible says this thing, and so I have to be I have to have this view on whatever it is, whatever like quote unquote hot button issue it is. If you could hit that and undo it, people's common sense would prevail and be like, wow, I'm coming at this from a place of hate and lack of understanding and lack of love. And yeah, common sense would prevail, human experience would prevail, all of that would come out. But because of the baggage of how people are brought up in these systems that they grow up in, it makes it so much harder.
Not to mention that religion and politics are seemingly more intertwined than they've been in decades.
Totally.
Which doesn't help at all.
Yeah.
If I could, I'd like to now pick your brain for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Just with everything that's going on. I mean, what in relation to this sort of, not to get too heavy, guys, but in relation to this sort of like cracking down on, trans youth and trans humans and drag performers apparently, and all this bullshit. So you have a very different geographical perspective than I do. What's the tenor like around all this stuff in Idaho?
Well, it depends on where you are in Idaho. So that's what's really interesting is, so if you're in, if say you go to Boise and you're in a certain corner of Boise, then you'll see nothing but love and nothing but acceptance and nothing but, all things good. But if you even drive like 10 minutes another direction, it could be, it's like you're in Gummo. It's like you're in a documentary. And so those two things are always at war. And so it totally depends on where, what region you're in, but it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking when you see some of that stuff, or you drive past some of the bumper stickers, like the outwardly hateful things that people fucking put on the back of their car.
Yeah.
For what? It's like, what are you trying to like? And yeah, I just can't even, it causes so many heightened emotions that, yeah, it's always this growing experience in the sense of trying to, when you're around that so often, how do you view humanity the same way? And it's challenging.
Yeah. And I mean, part of you, you being anyone, tries to sometimes not to rationalize the sort of virulent other side, but kind of to, because part of you, you're curious. You're like, well, why in the world are you worried about this? Are you thinking about this? Are you legislating about this? Like, why is it bothering you? But then there's no answer to that, because anything you come up with is complete horseshit. It's illogical.
Totally. And I think it's because it makes people feel uncomfortable in the sense of, it goes back to the brainwashing. It goes back to the ways that people, these for, like quote unquote traditional ways that people were brought up. And then they get to this point where things start not computing with that. And I think the reason that they probably end up putting bumper stickers on their cars or yelling out of their trucks or you name it, is probably because they also have that war going on inside of their brains, knowing
for sure
that this, that they might not even, some of them might not even feel the way that what's coming out of their mouth, but they don't know any other way because
they wouldn't even know know that.
They're just so up their own ass.
And it's, I feel fortunate in a sense to live in the Northeast as a gay man, as a married gay man. I worry about going elsewhere. My sister is trans and she lives in New Orleans. And so I just I think about this kind of stuff sometimes. I'm like, where do I want to go? Because especially in the past 4 or 5 and now today years, it's like, it's feeling so suffocating.
Yeah, for sure.
Way. So I'm glad there's a part anyway of the cities still in the West and in the South that do have an openness to them. So that is nice to hear.
Well, yeah, and it's also very individual too. So you could be even outside of Boise, you could be in Idaho City, or you could be in all these other places, and you could get into certain conversations with people where you might go into the conversation again if you have any kind of free judgment of someone based on they might be wearing hunting gear, or they might be, you might think that they're going to be a certain way, and then they say something and you're like, fucking hell, I feel like shit for having this thought that you were a certain way and you're not that way.
Right.
So that's also a beautiful thing where people surprise you in ways of, you realize, no, there is love everywhere.
Yeah.
You just have to know where to look. And yeah, and Idaho's gorgeous. And so that's a huge reason why my wife and I live here. Is we have nieces that live around the corner, and it's fucking beautiful, and there's a lot of great things going for it. But that's not to say that there's not a lot of challenging aspects as well.
Yeah. And, to spin this into saying something else nice about Idaho, because, I don't want to take too much of a shit on Idaho. We love Idaho.
Yeah, for sure.
So then what do you think a misconception is about Idaho that you'd like to debunk?
Well, everyone thinks it's Iowa.
That's fair.
It's definitely not Iowa. People think it's flat. People think people have no idea how beautiful it is. And I would say that it's fucking stunning. There's places throughout Idaho that feel like you're in the heart of Alaska, or it feels like you're on another planet. So it's very, very transportive, and it's very inspiring, because that's where all of my, like, the visual ammunition, especially for this record, it all comes from Idaho. So it's all the places I drive past all the time, or walks that I go on, or all that stuff. So yeah, it's visually unbelievable.
Yeah, and there's a sense to the new record and the visuals and the videos going along with it of that sort of very lived in experience that I don't think would feel this way if it wasn't coming from someone who is from there and stayed there.
Totally.
You're a musician. Yes, you're an indie musician. It's not like you're Nick Jonas, but like, you're a musician. You could have gone many, many places, and you still operate out of Idaho. And I feel like I can't think of anyone else who really does that has any sort of visibility. And so why not try to represent it in the light that you feel it deserves?
Yeah, because it's always been such a great home base, in the sense of, especially, it's easy to take it for granted, and take the beauty for granted, and take the family and friends and all that stuff for granted, until you leave. If I go on a trip somewhere, if I'm on tour, and then when I come back home, it hits you on, well, there's so much here to pull from, and there's a specific, I'm convinced there's a specific heartbeat to every city across the world, or territory in general. There's a spirit to it. And it's no different with Idaho, where there's this thing where, there's just this thing to it that for a long time, artistically, I had steered away from. And I don't know why that is. It's probably a lack of confidence. Actually, I'm sure it was a lack of confidence, because if I found myself at a bar in New York, and I tell people I'm from Idaho, there was this whole thing of, people treat you like you're a farmer, or they treat you like
they're like, oh, thank goodness you're here now.
Yeah, totally. That's it. That's exactly it. Where it's like, oh wow, like thank God you're out of that environment, and you're where you belong. And that drove me crazy, but it also made me, there was this weird shame almost that came with home, until I grew up enough to realize, like, what the fuck am I doing? Because this is my home, and this is my day to day, and to not steer into that is a tragedy. So this was the first time that my eyes were really open to what it is that I live in, and how it's viewed by other people around the world. Could be, the more I noticed that the more that I had talked about Idaho, or people had seen certain pictures back even years ago of, like, okay, where are you from? Like, what's your neighborhood look like? All that. It was interesting to people. And so that was a new concept for me too. Cause for me, it was home. So I didn't think anything of it, but there's, yeah, it's unlike a lot of places around the world.
Well, yeah, there's kind of an alien quality to it to
Uh-huh.
people like over where I am. I mean, I've never been to I got to get to Idaho. I've never been to Idaho.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I know nothing about it.
There's a lot of goodness here.
Yeah. What color is your hair right now?
My color is natural.
Oh, okay.
It's just, yeah, it's dark. My natural hair color is actually way darker than a lot of people realize.
Well, it's because in my mind you're always like pink or green.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, I haven't dyed it in a minute.
Okay.
I dyed it for there's going to be a music video coming out for Prize Fighter. Again, I don't know when this will come out, but there's a music video coming out for the track Prize Fighter, and I bleached it for that, which was like a month ago. But
Okay.
now it's back to normal.
It's back. All right. All right. Well, your new record that we've talked a lot about, even though you were thinking you wouldn't be able to. Kevin is a Junkyard, comes out June 9th on Fat Possum. Shout out to Fat Possum too, by the way. You've been with them since the beginning.
Oh, they're the best.
Like, that's so cool that you kind of abandoned Youth Lagoon and then came back and they were like, yeah, okay, here you go.
Well, and I was with them the whole time. So even Mulberry Violence, that was done. I had done a little imprint, but it was through Fat Possum. So
right,
so even that was technically, it was all through Fat Possum.
Yeah.
So I just my whole thing that's the most important in terms of the team that I surround myself with is people that they're always in your corner. And Fat Possum, yeah, they've always just, no matter what tangent or train I'm on, they're on it too. And that's not easy to find, especially the way that I work musically, because my whole thing is I'll just pursue whatever my brain has to pursue. There, no questions asked. And so if no one's on that train but me and Fat Possum or who else is, like on the team, but even if it's just me, that train is going to leave the station because it has to. But yeah, it's that's just how I've always worked. So I've never ever and never will be someone who caters to other people and does things anything outside of on my own terms. And so Fat Possum has always been nothing but supportive and nothing but always right there by my side. So huge shout out to Fat Possum.
Yeah, shout out to Fat Possum. Thank you, Trevor, very much for this hour of your time. I had quite the pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. I feel the same way.
Thanks. And I look forward to people hearing the record. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
All right, you too. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye-bye.